We're joined by Public Defender Dawn Diener. Dawn, if you would please introduce who you have with you and then begin your budget presentation for us.
Thank you, Councilman. My name is Dawn Diener. I am the Public Defender for Nashville. To my right is Jerilyn Manning, who is our Deputy Public Defender, and to my left is Sandra Ray, our Administrative Services Manager. I do have a few brief comments that I'd like to make this evening. There are a lot of new faces on the council that I haven't seen before, and so I just want to make sure everybody knows who we are and what we do at our office. First and foremost, we are the largest criminal defense, and I would say the best criminal defense law firm in Nashville, Tennessee. We cover all levels of court system, representing individuals who are charged with committing a crime who cannot afford to hire a lawyer. I think you heard earlier during our clerk's presentation, Howard Gentry, that a large percentage of those folks coming through the criminal court system are indigent, and I think most estimates place that around 75 to 80% of criminal defendants are indigent. So our office provides representation to those individuals at General Sessions Court, in the state trial courts, criminal court, in the appellate courts of the Court of Criminal Appeals and Supreme Court, and then lastly in juvenile court. We have great employees at our office, and you all should be very proud to know that the Public Defender's Office employees work very hard, and they are what make our office work so well and provide such quality services to our clients in our community. Second, I think we consider ourselves a community service agency, and so we respond every day to questions from people in the community who may have had a loved one who's been arrested, who may have had some sort of difficulty in the criminal justice system, who will call us for help. We provide educational advocacy to students in Metro Public School systems who are special needs students who may be at risk of being expelled or disciplined as a result of their educational issues. We also have partnered with the Criminal Court Clerk's Office in providing some educational programs in the community. I think earlier Mr. Gentry spoke about the outreach they were doing with MMPS. We've called it Bringing Justice to You, where we go out into the community and talk about expungements and driver's license issues. And frankly, the employees at our office are active in so many community events. They are active in voter restoration clinics. They go out and talk to juveniles at the Oasis Center about the criminal court system and how to prevent or coming into the system, things to do to improve their futures. We have many of our lawyers. This year they coached 3 of the high school mock trial teams that participated here, including teams for McGavock and Hume-Falk. So our staff is really active in the community as well, and we see that as a role for our office to provide as a community service agency. With all that said, in terms of this year's budget, our current, as you'll see in the materials I provided, we made significant requests of the mayor's office this year for budget improvements. And those are really to meet the challenges that we're facing as our office tries to provide both direct services and community services to the community. We need social workers to do that. General Johnson just finished talking about how invaluable the social workers are to his office, not only in helping victims through the system, but also because they relieve that requirement from lawyers that frees them up to do the work of lawyers and allows social workers to be able to do what they're best qualified to do, which is to evaluate social problems that individuals involved in the criminal justice system may have. For our office, that is our clients. It's interviewing our clients' family members, determining what might have brought them into the criminal justice system in an effort to try to help them resolve those problems so that they don't come back into the criminal justice system, so that we can reduce recidivism rates. We have also had a case management system at our office that's electronic for about the last 10 years. And this year we've realized that we're not keeping the best data or extracting the best information that we can from that. And as a result, JIS has been very instrumental in helping us over the last few months to try to update that system and really start to exploit it to get the information we would like to be able to give this council and to the administration about the effectiveness of what we're doing in our office. So we're very hopeful by next year with the really important help of JIS that we'll be able to come with real good data on how we're doing. The other real challenge that I would point out follows up on some of the things General Johnson said. We have lawyers at our office who started 4 years ago who are still making the same salary that they were making 4 years ago. And I'm sure that that's a common refrain that you're going to hear from several metro departments. I think it's probably an issue with agencies like the police department, the fire department, where someone comes on as a rookie for the police department and 4 years later may still be making the same salary that the rookie is making. We are not a state office. And so even though there is every other public defender office in the state except Memphis is a state office who gets paid on a state pay plan, we do not. What that means is that a lawyer who's with our office today, having been here for 4 years, is probably making $10,000 less than their counterpart in the state system right now. And that's a challenge. It is a challenge to keep lawyers who we've invested in, to keep them in the office when they could go to another state office or they could go into private practice and make more money. And so that is a challenge that we're facing, and we're grateful that the 4% increase has been proposed this year, and we think that will help us. And we understand that this is not the problem won't be solved overnight. And so our employees are very grateful that they have been given consideration in this year's mayor's proposed budget, and I just wanted to say that on their behalf. The other thing that we've really done this year as the economy has improved is to try to examine our funding streams. For the first time as my tenure as the public defender, we're talking about improvements, really. And our two sources of funding are state funding and local funding. As I said, we are not a state office at all. We are part of the Metro Charter, but we do receive state funding. And this year we have made significant efforts to try to improve our state funding. We identified what we believe is a problem and how they've been funding us. And with the administration's help, we did a lot of work this year to try to address that. We didn't get as far as we'd like, but we feel like we've made some real work and may very well have some success perhaps next year in increasing the amount of state funding that comes to our public defender office. On the other hand, there is our local funding. We have been very lucky to have years of support from successive administrations, and this one is no different. The mayor's proposed budget this year includes a suggested improvement for our office that eventually, when all of it shakes out, turns out to be somewhere around $85,000 of an improvement. What that funding would be used for is our rent increase that we're required to pay. It would help us move from very old copiers that are constantly breaking down to new leased copiers. And finally, it would give us some funding to hire probably just one social worker, although the budget improvement request includes two. I don't know that we would have, when our reduction is calculated in, I don't think we would have enough to actually fund 2 full-time social worker positions. We are very grateful for that improvement, and we are asking that the council leave that intact in the budget for this year. The other issue that Councilman Holloman alluded to is that when it comes to local funding, there is a state statute that requires for local funding a 75% parity between the district attorney's office and the public defender's office. That state statute requires specifically that any increase in local funding for positions or office expense for a district attorney shall be accompanied by a 75% increase to the public defender in the district. As a result of that, we took a look at what the suggested improvement was for the district attorney's office, and this year our improvement fell a little bit short of the 75% number. So I'm bringing that to your attention. We would ask that the council consider increasing if the council leaves intact the suggested improvement for the DA's office, we would submit that our increased improvement should be 75% of that. Obviously, if the council chooses to reduce that, then we would be asking for any improvement to be at 75% of whatever the DA's office increase is. That might be a little bit confusing, and I'll be happy at this point to field questions that y'all have.
Councilman Holloman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Dawn, for being here. I do have a couple questions about that. But related to that, you said that you have 2 social worker positions that are being funded, but you thought that you could only actually hire 1 because of the reductions. Now, I assume that there were line item reductions made in the mayor's proposed budget. And so are you saying that you disagree with cutting some of those, or for some reason unable to cut some of those, and you would need to offset that with the other social worker's salary? Can you just explain what you mean by why you wouldn't be able to hire that second social worker?
Sure. If you look at the budget details for the Public Defender's Office, it includes I'm looking at the general services, the GSD funds. The special funds are typically grant funds. They're money that isn't coming from Metro. Typically, in the first place, they're coming from federal grants or things of that nature. Internal service fees are the type of thing that typically don't end up in the accounting of what's our bottom line dollar to spend. And so on the budget detail for us, we're looking at general service dollars, which includes improvements of $110,100. But then we have a bottom line, a budget reduction of $28,700. Which puts us at 81.4. With 81.4 of an improvement, we'll need to cover increased rent and expenses for our office, as well as a minimal
So that's not
amount.
part of the additional appropriation, your increased rent?
It is. There is an
Okay.
appropriation for rent. The 110,100 includes $2,000 in increased copier expenses. I think it's $8,100 or $8,200 in increased rent expenses, and then $100,000 to hire 2 social workers. So that's where you get the 110,100.
Okay.
But then we also have a line item budget reduction for our discretion, and that reduction is $28,700.
And that precludes you from fully funding the social worker position?
Right. I think we would be unable to fund 2 full-time social workers with what we're left with, which is 81.4, to cover increased rent, increased copy expenses, and a full-time social
So
worker.
I missed the shortage, but where I was going with that is if you receive the $18,000 that you're requesting over and above what you've been proposed to receive, would that be enough to bring your bottom line back up to be able to hire 2 social workers, or is that still not enough? What was the delta? I didn't hear what you said.
I think it's going to be really close, and I think probably what we would end up doing, and maybe be the timing of the hiring of the second social worker or something like that. But we would make every effort we could to bring on both social workers. We are desperately in need of them in our adult division. We've had 1 social worker for our entire adult division for the last 20 years, and so we need to increase the number of social workers for our adult division drastically. So we would do anything we could, and I think we'd be pretty close with that additional amount.
Okay. And you say that that's statutory obligation. Is that something the Metro Legal agrees with, disagrees with? I mean, the reason I ask is it seems if it's an obligation, that's something we wouldn't have a lot of choice about. But since it wasn't funded, I'm guessing there may be some disagreement about that. And I know you said a couple times you're a local office, so I read that to be state funding for a state-funded public defender. I mean, I haven't read the statute, but that just from what you said, that's what it sounded like to me. Can you just explain that a little bit more?
I can. The statute actually was enacted when the statewide Public Defenders Conference was created in 1992.
Okay, so after we were already an existing public defender by years.
Exactly. Right. Metro's Public Defender Office has existed since the charter was created.
Right.
When the state took the step of creating its Public Defenders Conference throughout the state, Metro remained a Metro office.
Right.
So we receive state funding in a way that's different than the rest of the state. We receive it in the same way Memphis does. Memphis and Nashville are treated similarly by the state for public defender services. But the statute that was enacted was sort of a compromise over local funding issues that were part of the discussion in the creation of the statewide Public Defender Conference. The statute applies to Memphis and Nashville for local funding issues. And
specifically? Yes,
and there is actually an Attorney General opinion that exists that was the result of a question posed by someone out of Memphis related to local funding issues by the Memphis government. So that statute applies. Now, whether or not Metro Legal, this is not something that I've talked to Metro Legal about. As I said, this is the first year really that, as long as I've been the public defender, where there has been an improvement to the DA's office that didn't have a corollary, an equally 75%. I think last year we got more than the DA's office did.
Well, that was my other question. Does it go the other way? Have you had years where you've been a beneficiary? Okay. Did you bring it up that year?
Well, no, because this.
That's what I'm asking.
The statute is a minimum funding statute, and it specifically says that any.
And do you read it to be on a year-by-year basis, I guess, is my ultimate question.
I do. So. And the way I read the statute is that any increase in funding to the DA's office requires a 75% funding increase to the public defender's office. And so it is, and I want to emphasize, it's a minimum funding statute. And local governments can decide that they believe additional funding is needed for public defender services at a time when additional funding is not needed for DA services. So
how do the total budgets match up at this point in terms of funding? Do you know?
I do. You have to calculate in what the state contributes to the district attorney's office, which is not included in these budget documents.
You're only funded locally.
We are we are funded by the state, but our state funding is reflected as revenue in our metro budget. So
not actual state employees.
Right. And so you can look on our budget document and you're going to see revenue of $1.5 to $1.6 million. It's closer to 1.6 now. And our total budget is fairly close to, it's 5.8 million projected for next year, or proposed for next year. The state's, or the district attorney's budget documents do not reflect their state income. That is entirely Metro and grant funding. They get an additional $6 million from the state, approximately. So their total funding is, when you add in Metro dollars, grant dollars, and forfeiture, fines, seizures, and state, is somewhere around $14 million. And our office,
7.5.
And our office is $5.8 million.
But I thought your total was 7.4 from what you said.
No,
okay.
Our total funding is what our total budget is 5.8 million, and about 1.6 of that comes from the state.
I understand. Okay.
So in other words, Metro funds us at about $4.2 million in the proposed budget, and the state picks up about 1.6 of that. The state's funding is not reflected in the district attorney's budget at a glance documents. It's not part of that.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Council Lady Moore, you're recognized.
Just a comment. I just want to say you all do a great job, and I have referred some individuals to you, and just keep up the good work, and we're going to look at this
Thank you.
and see if we can fund it. But anyway, you do a great job. All of y'all do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other members in my queue, Dawn, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.